talk a little bit about how you can strengthen your analysis of your quotations. I took a look at your drafts for the peer review. My comments are on your outlines, but I skimmed through a couple of drafts and I'm noticing that a lot of you have great quotes, but the analysis is missing. That analysis is really crucial. That's really the difference between an essay that's passing or an essay that's in the A range and an essay that is not quite passing level or maybe even just kind of earning a C. This is really important for this essay and for all the essays in this class. It's also a big difference between AI generated writing, right, that predicts what other people have said about a text and kind of says nothing in particular, but it sounds good, and really specific, authentic writing that's diving into a quotation, unpacking it in a meaningful and original and interesting way, and connecting it back to the thesis. I want to show you an example. So rather than take some examples from your essays, I'm going to give you an example that I have created that is just sort of similar to what I'm seeing given your drafts. So this would be an example for an essay about the paper menagerie. I want to show you a passage that is sort of just skimming the surface. It's giving me a little bit of analysis, but it's not really diving deep into the quotation. Let's take a look at this one right here. So we have, after Mark comes over, Jack begins to see his paper tiger differently. And then we have the quotation. I had never thought of Lahu as trash, but looking at him now, he was really just a piece of wrapping paper. Then I have the author's last name in parentheses. Then we have some analysis. Now the narrator feels like his toy really is just paper. It's less valuable. So I think that would be a fine place to start, right? Sort of explaining what the quotation is saying. That's a good place to start, but we need more than that when it comes to our analysis. If you can't give me more than that, then it probably means that you're not picking the best quote. Maybe you're picking a quote really just to summarize what's being said, rather than picking a quotation with really rich language that you can then analyze and tie back into a thesis. Let's take a look at an improved version. It's certainly not perfect. You can add to it. We could polish it up. But this version is improved not just because there's more analysis, not just the quantity, but the analysis is going a little bit deeper, or a lot deeper. Let's take a look at this one. After Mark comes over, Jack begins to see his paper tiger differently. Then we have the quotation. When Mark mocks the narrator by asking if his mother makes his toys out of trash, the narrator focuses on the shabby material that Lahu is made from rather than the magic of his animation. Lahu, sorry, I'm probably not pronouncing that as well as I could, that means tiger. The italicized word trash suggests that it's worthless, even dirty. In fact, this toy isn't even a store-bought gift. It's one made from the Christmas paper in which a different gift was wrapped. A moment before, Jack had seen Mark's battery-operated OB-1 as unimpressive, but now he will begin to see his own magical animals as unimpressive. Soon, Jack will internalize this idea that a mass-produced gift is more marvelous than a magical handmade one. So here I think you can see the beginnings of some analysis that's much more thoughtful, and I think something kind of cool happens as you're analyzing a text. You begin to learn something more about the story. Not just the techniques that the writer is using, but some of kind of the bigger themes. As we're writing this, we're like, oh, okay, that's really interesting that the word trash is being used, right? Think of all of the different connotations. Trash obviously means garbage. It also means something that should be discarded. It also kind of makes me think of like the expression, one man's trash, another man's treasure. So trash has obviously a very negative implication. And Mark is really making Jack view not like the magic and the beauty and just the genius of his mother creating these toys and breathing life into these toys, this origami, but instead is just focused on like the material, right? The most literal part of the toy, the really vulnerable part of the toy, which is the fact that it's just made out of wrapping paper. I also think the fact that it's wrapping paper, and we learned earlier it's Christmas wrapping paper, kind of makes us think of some sort of other gift. This wasn't even a gift itself. This is the thing that was wrapping up a gift, something that most people would just discard or throw away. but his mother folds up and saves. And that's kind of an interesting statement too. A different student could take this same quote and talk about the mother's genius, right? Her craftiness, the fact that she's very resourceful, that she takes something that's discarded, she saves it, and she breathes life into it, and she uses it to cheer up her son and to add some playfulness to their lives. So that could be something that a different student might focus on, just using the same quotation. I think the analysis is also pointing to kind of the difference between Mark's toy, which is obviously mass-produced, battery-operated, a reference to Star Wars movies, something that a lot of people would have. That kind of makes me think a little bit of like consumer culture and American identity that the narrator is obviously trying to grapple with, especially as he becomes a teenager. Versus this type of toy, which cannot be bought in a store, which is worthless in terms of what it's made of, but is so powerful and priceless in terms of what it represents, right? A piece of his mother, in a sense, is really like baked into that toy. Also, as we're writing it, we notice the idea of like whatever Mark is saying, as awful as this kid Mark is, whatever Mark is saying about the toy, then the narrator, Jack, is starting to internalize that, right? Mark says, "Did your mom makes toys out of trash?" And then the narrator starts to internalize that. And we see that happening throughout the story in another incident with Mark when they're older in school as well. So what other people say kind of becomes something that the narrator starts to believe, at least in this point of the story. So we want to make sure that when we're analyzing these quotes, we're not just scratching the surface. I like to think of a gemstone or something. On the outside, it might look really rough, and you would kind of scratch the surface a little bit and it would still look really rough and gray. But if you really dig deeper, or if you crack it open, you discover something really vibrant and bright and really interesting. That's kind of how I think of your analysis, right? This is really the difference between an effective essay that is really specific and really text-based and a vague, predictable essay that's not really getting the job done. Okay, so I hope this helps.